Welcome again to the session 7 of our discussion. Our session is going to dwell on the information technology revolution, what we call the information technology revolution. I'm sure this one will be a very interesting area for you, because you are the technology people, technology savvy people. Now, by way of introduction, the advent of information technology revolutionized the generation and distribution of information. And this session is concerned with the evolution of communication systems from oral tradition through writing to publishing and now telecommunications. And the objectives we will seek to achieve is for you to be able to trace the developments of communication systems for transmission of information, to be able to explain the differences in information transfer through various communication systems and how it has affected the use of information in society. We should be able to explain the importance of standardization and information communication and transmission. And then, so we'll be looking at major topics like ICT and the information field, the first ICT revolution, that is writing. And then the third topic will be information storage. The topic 4 will be second ICT revolution, that is movement of messages. So we want to start with topic 1, which will be on ICT and the information field. So here we are looking at the processes. Now, there's a common misperception that the digital technology revolution was the beginning of ICT revolution. But experts have noted that if the human voice as an instrument of, for exchange of information goes back to 33,000 years ago, and it is technology, because formerly people couldn't talk. And so the moment there is a change in the way people do things, it involves technology. And so ICT and information field concerned with 4 processes. Here we are talking about the information creation and capture, information transmission, information storage, and then management and control of information flow. Now, when we talk about information creation and capture, we are looking at how information is created and then captured. So there's the issue of memorization, where you keep the information in your head. You chew or you memorize the information, it's kept in your head. Or writing, you commit it to writing and it becomes a permanent document. Or photography, you take pictures, again, you encapsulate the information in a certain format. Or audio recording, when you speak out or you talk the information and it is recorded, or they can be digitalized or digitized if you like. In terms of transmission of information, we are talking about physical carriage of information. Now, physical carriage of information concerns or covers CDs, books, letters, broadcasts. At a certain point in time, it was carried by carrier pigeons. I don't know if you heard about carrier pigeons. In fact, during the Second World War, carrier pigeons were used to pass information on, because human beings were detected and they were killed or they were imprisoned. And so pigeons were used. You have trained pigeons, of course. They have messages tied to their legs, and then they fly to their destination. We also kept information in one set. Information can be kept in the head. Information was also transmitted through post office. If you keep the information in your head, you go and pass it on by word of mouth to the next person. Information was also transmitted through the post office. And then information began to be transmitted over the airways by satellite, by radio, and by television. Now it is done through cable. Still on the issue of transmission of information, telephone, telegraphy, internet, these are all means for carrying or transmitting information. Now, over the ages, mankind used many methods to transmit information, including voice, signals, flags, electrical and optical signals, human language. When it comes to information storage is dependent on 2 factors. 1, how urgently we need the stored information to be retrieved. How urgently we need the information that has been stored to be retrieved. And then 2, the initial packaging of the information. Initially, information was stored in pigeonholes. if you don't know what a pigeonhole is, you can visit the Department of Information Studies or any other department in the university, and you will see that wooden boxes that have been put there with lecturers' name on, and which information is put for lecturers. That's what we mean by pigeonholes. Information was initially stored in pigeonholes, and then information that was captured in books were stored in shelves. Before today, we have a computer memory in which we store information. The management and control of information flow, that is in the area of informatics, which deals with the creation of systems to facilitate the management and control of information flow. It's another branch of information science. Then the first ICT revolution, what we call the first ICT revolution is is writing. Like I said earlier on, people think that information technology, the advent of information technology was, or digital information was the beginning of information technology, but that wasn't it, even writing, because initially people didn't used to write. People were oral and passed on information orally until writing systems were developed. And so to manage information, it must be shared. And there are two steps. We have the first step and we have the second steps of managing information or transferring information. The first step is the transfer of information from one medium to the other, which also involves two methods. That is oral tradition, that is storytelling or recounting of national and ethnic epics. And then we have the theater, which can also be used in spreading information or transmitting information or disseminating information. Then the second aspect of transferring information from one medium to the other is writing, where writing captures ideas in a more permanent way, and it constitutes the first great information technology revolution, that is writing. But in the beginning, we had what we call cave paintings, which were Paleolithic paintings, which are the first known recorded information. These date back to between 30,000 and 32,000 years before the birth of Christ. And these are drawings or scratches that were found in caves when human beings began to live in shelters instead of roaming about and killing animals and being killed by huge animals. I'm sure you remember dinosaurs and the rest. Now these are representations, or these were representations of animals and nude Venus figures. And they were found in caves, some at Chauve Pont d'Arc. Obviously this is French, and so you can guess that it will be in France. Other places are Grottes Cosquer, elsewhere in Europe, and then South America, and then Australia. You find all these things there. Now the meanings of these paintings, nobody can really put a finger on their meaning, so we can only conjecture what they meant. And some of the conjectures are that they were prayers to the gods. Some of them were just depictions of a hunt, how they were able to kill an animal for food. But these were all efforts at communicating, or they all represent efforts to communicate information to each other and to perhaps the gods, and then eventually to descendants or later generations. These were static information records. You could not share them over space. You could not carry them because, like I said, there were scratches on caves, cave walls. They symbolized in the architecture of religions, or they are symbolized in the architecture of religions, for example. So when you see pictures of medieval cathedrals, you'll find some of these things there. And then after those cave paintings or scratches came formal writing systems. And the first one that is known is what we call the cuneiform, which dates back to 3,500 BC. That is before Christian era. And it was developed by the Sumerians. Now, the Sumerians lived in the area called Mesopotamia, which now is called the Middle East. bordering on Iran, Iraq, and the rest. Now, cuneiform is a wedge-shaped writing, and they included mostly financial records and inventories. And then they have it's a complex system of writing that had 2,000 symbols, which were later reduced to about half of that number. So you can imagine recording or writing using 2,000 symbols. Even using 26 symbols of the alphabet is a challenge for a lot of people. Then there was hieroglyphics. That was also invented by the Egyptians, and it dates back to 3,000 years before the Christian era, or if you like, before the birth of Christ. Now the Egyptians called it the writing of the gods, and it has 3 symbols. The first one, pictographs, representing objects, and then ideographs, representing ideas, and then the alphabet, representing the phonetics. Now the Sumerian writings, that is the cuneiform writings, preserved complex records of mythology, the Gilgamesh epics, Code of Hammurabi. These are all things that you will find if you are history-minded, or if you are interested in history. These are things that you can read about. Very, very interesting adventure stories to read. The Egyptian writings preserve the history of Egypt. That's why we know so much about Egypt. And then the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which was also issued in the 1,240 years before the Christian era. These are things, all things that you can have access to. Then Chinese writing, which also dates back to 1,200 years before the Christian era. They used the oracle bone inscriptions that were discovered in 1899. And then there were bronze inscriptions that also date back to 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. Then we have the Shi Huangdi. We are still talking Chinese here, which are standardized Chinese scripts that were produced in 221 years before the Christian era. Then in terms of information storage and writing are intertwined, because once you start writing, you must have a place to keep what you have written, so that the writing, which is a record of experience, human experience, will then become useful for later generations. And so it became necessary that once records have been generated, they must be kept in a place, and that was how libraries and archives began to be established. And so archaeologists discovered the first library in the form of clay tablets in 2001. These were discovered. First Sumerian clay tablets were discovered. And then there was a library, ancient library at Alexandria, which was reputed to or reckoned to be the greatest library in the ancient world. It was built in the city of Alexandria in Egypt. It is there up to today. Now the library at Alexandria was built by the Ptolemaic dynasty. If you have watched the Ten Commandments before, I'm sure, or you have been reading your Bible well, I'm sure you have come across one of the Egyptian pharaohs named Ptolemy. There were 3 of them: Ptolemy 1, Ptolemy 2, Ptolemy 3, and then later on their descendants also came. Cleopatra, for example, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, was also a descendant of the Ptolemies. She was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty. And so UNESCO has provided funding to restore the library in Alexandria. Now, somewhere along the line, libraries became metamorphosed from the clay tablets into scrolls, and then into codex, and then to digital materials. So now you have digital materials making up the contents of libraries. Now during the period of the Ptolemies, books were either handwritten, or they were brushed, or later on we had pens and then inkjet printer, and so things have been changing or developing. That is, the technology has been developing from time immemorial up to now. Then came the information age with the new formats of the book as we have it now, the hard disk in the computer memory, and then handheld, even book readers. Then the second ICT revolution had to deal with movement of messages, where technology to move messages began to be developed. Initially, we had the post office, we had courier services. Now, in order to speed up signals, drums, which make use of sound wave, smoke signals, which make use of light waves. There were signal ties, we had lighthouses, the semaphores, there are flags, all of which provided information in one form or the other. Now, problems that were encountered with the human movement of messages were that we could only transmit messages or signals over short distances. And so, for example, if you take the post office, formerly or in our time when we were young, you would have to buy writing pad, buy envelopes, buy stamps, send it to the post office, and then you post your letter. And the letter will go right, supposing you are writing to the UK, it might take about 3 months to get to the UK. And the reply will take another 3 months to get back to you, 6 months, just for a simple communication. I'm sure today you will be laughing at that. But then those were the fastest ways of transmitting information or sending messages at a time or moving messages at a time. Again, there were difficulty in sending complex messages accurately. It was time consuming for you to send messages. Then the 19th century came with a lot of improvements in the movement of messages. At the beginning of the 19th century, there were no paved roads, there were no railways, there were no telephones, there were no electric utilities. Goods and services and people used horsepower on land or wind power on water or walking. So if you wanted to carry a message to somewhere, you have to walk or you have to run. I'm sure you can remember the origins of the marathon. Then as the 19th century progressed, improvements started coming in, where the steam locomotive was invented by George Stephenson in 1814. Photography was also invented by Joseph Nipsian Louis. And then he has a long name there. The same name is Daguerre. That was in the 1820s. And then the first typewriter was invented or came into being in 1829. Braille printing was also invented by Louis Braille in 1829. The telegraph was invented by Samuel Morse, and then later on the Morse code came into being. Bicycles were introduced by Kirkpatrick Macmillan, 1839. The mid-19th century, postage stamps came into being in England. They were used for the first time in England. And then the fax machine was invented by Alexander Bain in 1843. Then the first commercial telegraphic line was established between Baltimore, that is in Maryland, and Washington, D.C., all in the USA. And then John Tyndall invented fiber optic, 1845. Latter part of the 19th century, we have Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the first telephone. And then fountain pen. Fountain pen was also invented by Lloyd Edison Waterman in 1884. Before then, feathers were what were used to write. You have to sharpen feathers of turkeys or crows or vultures or large birds. Then the internal combustion engine, that's a diesel engine, was invented by Rudolf Diesel in 1892. Radio was invented by Guglielmo Massini, 1895, and it had a range of only 100 meters. So if you were at the Brown Library, for example, you will not be able to hear the radio, have a reception. The 20th century brought in more innovations in terms of the movement of messages. And so the first airship was launched by Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin in 1900. And then the Wright brothers invented the aeroplane in 1903. Radio voice transmission was also introduced by Lee DeForest in 1906. Color photography came into being by Auguste and Louis Lumière in 1907. Then the gyro compass that is used for aircraft navigation was also invented by Elmer A. Sperry in 1908. That prevented aeroplanes from crashing. And then motion pictures, talking motion pictures was also invented by Thomas Edison in 1910. The first electrical ignition system for cars was invented by Charles Kettering in 1912. And then cathode ray television, in other words, television also was developed by Vladimir Kosma Zworykin in 1929. And then the mechanical television, that is television as we know it now, was introduced by John Baird in 1929. First broadcast of a television program was made by the BBC in 1930. The car radio was invented by Paul Gaff in 1929. There are several of such inventions spanning the years. And so the first software-controlled computer was also introduced by John Atanasoff and Clifford Berry in 1942. Cellular phone was first designed in 1947. And then the VTR, video tape recorder, by Charles Gisberg in 1951. I'm sure you have been using these things, but it has never occurred to you how they came into being. Then the modem came into being in 1958, audio cassette in 1962, video disc 1963, ARPANET in the late 1960s. Go and Google ARPANET. And then the internet in 1980s. The internet developed from the ARPANET. Then www, that is the World Wide Web, came into being in 1991. VCR was introduced in 1970. Microprocessor came into being in 1971. Inkjet and laser printer in the mid-1970s. MS-DOS and IBM PC, personal computer, came into being in 1981. CDs and CD players, 1982. DVD players were first marketed in 1996. Now we are coming closer home. The first MP3 players came in 1998. So in the main, these are the developments that occurred in the second communication revolution, if you want to put it that way. And these are references that will lead you to more information and more inventions that took place from the 19th century up to the present period of time. Thank you for listening.